Sure. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Today we're so excited. We're going to have Dr. Amanda Ferriola. So she got her doctorate degree in psychology from Rutgers University, and she teaches classes there. So she's not just a graduate, has a doctorate, but she teaches, and she's also the director of Tourette syndrome clinic at Rutgers University. And she is trained in so many different areas. She has expertise in behavior problems, ADHD, anxiety disorder, selective mutism, Tourette disorder, and many more. So her day job, she is a clinical psychologist, licensed psychologist at a private practice in New Jersey. And she and I also have founded and run this executive functioning coaching program called the PrEP program. So today she's going to share with us some cases and some experience that she has with kids who have difficulty completing homeworks or procrastination. So let's welcome. Go ahead, Amanda.
Thank you for the introduction. So I'm going to be talking today about procrastination, answering the question about what it is, and then some steps on how to address it. But please, I would like this to be interactive. So if anybody has any questions along the way, feel free to jump in and I'm happy to address them. Okay. All right, so I'm going to kind of just talk about two cases and then get into the content of the presentation. And at the end, we can kind of talk a little bit more about how we're addressing these cases. So the first is a 9-year-old male in 3rd grade with a diagnosis of ADHD. So every night the house is in chaos during homework time. Essays are the most challenging. He'll complete assignments at a rate of about 1 line every 10 minutes. Homework that should take about 20 minutes to complete ends up taking about 2 to 3 hours from the start to the end of the process. When parents attempt to help, he gives excuses. Left homework at school, forgot the teacher's instructions, doesn't have the right books or can't access Google Classroom, and so on. Okay, so the second case is a 17-year-old male in the 12th grade, gets, really high achieving, gets good grades, sets really high expectations. The goal is to attend a prestigious university, and the applications are, the time frame for the applications are coming up. So there's a lot of perfectionistic tendencies here. He spends excessive amounts of time on minor assignments, continuously delays starting the university applications, and then frequently changes the topic of the essay, convinced, there's a better idea out there somewhere, instead of, sticking with an original idea and completing the essay. He gets caught kind of trying to find that perfect topic for the essay. Okay, so what is procrastination? So when we think about procrastination, there are these 3 areas that we can think about. So procrastination is believed to be a self-regulation failure that's associated with a variety of personal and situational determinants. So research will suggest that task characteristics, personality facets, and environmental factors are the 3 main determinants of procrastination. So when we think about task characteristics, things like unclear instructions about assignments, the specific timing of rewards and punishments associated with the task. So this can really vary depending on the person or the task that they're completing, and then how aversive that task is. So, every child is different. Some kids love math and some kids absolutely hate math, but the way they feel about math is not the same way they feel about writing. So that aversiveness to the task really does make a difference when we think about procrastination. The other area is environmental factors. So things like temptation to engage in other tasks, incentives to complete the current task, and also accountability for task completion. There are obviously a lot of other factors that come into play when we think about the environment. And then we have personality facets. So we have the 5-factor model of personality. So those who aren't familiar, characteristics like extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, neuroticism, and openness to experience are generally the 5 facets when we think about personality. And then we have motivation and also cognition, your thoughts around the task itself that is being procrastinated. So why does procrastination matter? We see a lot of people engaging in procrastination. We ourselves, I'm sure, procrastinate plenty of tasks. Why does it matter that people procrastinate? So the things it affects, it can impede success with not only a task, but your larger success in life. It can influence an individual's mood. It can increase anxiety, depression, and it can lower self-esteem. And people who procrastinate are prone to poor performance. They're less prepared, so lower exam scores, slower job promotions, and also poorer overall health or health in general. Unfortunately, procrastination is linked to poorer overall health. So it is something that is worth targeting. Okay, so we want to break down the cycle of procrastination. So what's actually happening? And I'm going to focus on homework, but really you can apply this to any task that somebody is procrastinating. So a child will either think about homework or actually start doing homework. And then what happens is we get the sensation of anxiety or even fear, depending on the child. And then we find ways to avoid continuing to engage in the homework or complete the homework or avoid starting it altogether. And once wait, can you see my mouse?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So once we hit this point where we start to avoid, what happens immediately is we feel relief from our anxiety. So that anxiety goes away because we're now doing something else. And when that happens, we start to get these negative beliefs that we're not actually capable of doing the homework, or the homework really is as hard as we think it is. Or the only way we're going to feel good is if we don't complete the work. And so we get into this cycle where the next time we have to do the homework, we're much more likely when we start the task to experience higher levels of anxiety. And the more anxiety we experience, the more likely it is that we're going to avoid. Because in this original situation, we weren't experiencing that much anxiety. And so the relief we were feeling wasn't as big as the relief we'll feel when our anxiety is really high. So it's a kind of a vicious cycle here, but it's really easy to fall into. So this is kind of another way to get at the same idea, but children begin or even think about beginning homework and they start to experience those feelings of distress, discomfort, or anxiety. So they decide to do something else. And when they decide to do something else, they are able to escape or temporarily feel relief of the discomfort. Then we have those negative cognitions. So the belief that homework is too hard becomes reinforced. And then the anxiety around the homework increases. And because homework is something that kids have to do almost daily, if not daily, it's a cycle that gets reinforced pretty frequently. So we kind of have these three areas. We have thoughts around, yeah, let's take like filling out a college application as an example. So that's the task or the action that's happening. So we might have these thoughts. I'm so bad at writing essays. What if I'm rejected from schools? There's too much work. What if I can't finish it in time? And then we have emotions, right? So we feel anxious when we go to start to complete the application. And then we also have behaviors. So the behavior in this case is avoidance, right? Maybe an excuse, I'll do it tomorrow. And so we don't sit down to complete the college application. And this is really a good way to break down any task or situation where there's a little confusion or you want to find an approach to solve it. So generally, we as humans don't separate these three things, behaviors, feelings, and thoughts. But it is important to do so when we're looking for a solution to any type of problem that we're trying to solve. So we want to distinguish these three factors. Because the big question becomes, what changes first? Emotions, thoughts, or behaviors? And I don't know if you've ever tried to change your thoughts or emotions, but it's extremely hard to do. So I imagine you're all here because at some point or another, you must have tried to convince your child to do homework or a task that they didn't really want to do. And the question becomes, why is it so hard to change their mind? Why is it so hard to change their motivation to complete the task or to convince them that it's important in some way or that just sitting down to finish it will make their lives easier in the long run? I'm sure we've all had these conversations before. And the truth is, children also want to complete their homework. They might not like doing it or they might not like love school, but it's not that they don't want to complete the work. They don't actually want to procrastinate. They just get caught in these cycles. So I think oftentimes procrastination gets confused with laziness. But it's really easy to fall victim to behavioral patterns. And that is kind of what's happening with procrastination. So the motivation they usually have for preferred tasks, it just doesn't translate into the immediate drive to complete homework. So sometimes the more they want to do well, actually, the more stressed out they are, and the harder it is to sit down and complete work. So the excuse is that, and kids are so creative and smart. They really are. They find the most ingenious ways to get out of doing things that they don't really want to do. But after so the excuses they create for themselves after not completing a task are not the reasons for not completing the task in general. We know the reason is because of the anxiety associated with completing the homework assignment, and that happens for various reasons. But the reason they don't complete it is the relief they feel when they stop trying to complete the homework. So it's not the reasons that they're actually giving you. But those excuses are the consequence of not completing it because they need to rationalize it in their minds. It's not like they have a plan written out for themselves. Okay, when I feel anxious, I'm going to avoid doing my homework, and then I'm going to feel bad about myself. And then the next time I do homework, it's going to make it harder. So they're not cognizantly doing this. So when it happens, they create these excuses and they justify having avoided doing the work. So arguing is actually pretty pointless because it's not the cause of the procrastination in the first place. So we can't persuade them because their excuses are just a coping mechanism to explain why they have procrastinated in the first place. All right. So let's take this idea of procrastination and let's just say you want to get up early for a run. So, what are some of the things that would be helpful to you if you might not love running or waking up early in the morning? Yes, Brian.
Maybe finding ways to reduce friction that would have you go on the run. So like putting your shoes in a place where you can get to them easily instead of like putting them in the closet where you have to do that extra action of getting them out.
Yeah, that's a great example, right? So, and I like the term you use there, reducing the friction. So when your shoes are in a really easy place to grab them, it's increasing the likelihood that you will engage in the behavior that you don't really want to do, which is running. So you're changing the environment just a little bit, making it a little bit easier to complete a task. Yep. Anyone else?
And I can think about something that that I thought would be helpful, but it's actually
那
not.
那你现在你现
Um,
在记不记得？
which is if my husband kind of tells me and kind of list all these really good, like all these benefit about running, and be like, hey, you should really go run and da 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 da, and then so and so run, look at them, like, and then kind of try to compare me with other people, or trying to like kind of just talk me into it. And he might thought that that would be helpful, but it actually does very little, at 6 o'clock in the morning when I wake up.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I think, when we think about how you motivate a person, I think one of our go-to ways to do it is by using our words, right? Like, oh, this is so good for you. This is the reason that you should run. And this other person runs and they feel so good about themselves. Like that, all those things can be true. And is it helpful to get you to actually get out of bed in the morning and put your shoes on? Probably not, right? It's not very helpful in changing your behavior in that moment. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, so some other environmental things you can do is make sure you have an alarm set. Make sure you have your clothes and your shoes laid out. Make sure you've thought about where you're going to run. And if it's going to be dark because you're out so early, making sure you have a flashlight and making sure that you can finish the run in time to, get home and shower and make breakfast and still get to work. So when we've kind of changed and controlled the environment, so it makes it easier to access that behavior, which is running, which can be really aversive for people. But you can also build in ways to make it less aversive. So you can, find a really good audiobook that you've been really wanting to listen to and make a rule for yourself that you can only listen to it while you're running, right? That'll increase the chances of you actually going for that run because maybe you're not looking forward to the run, but you're looking forward to listening to that audiobook. Okay. So when we think about making changes, the best place, given this model, to intervene is here. It's when we are starting the task and experiencing that anxiety or stress or discomfort. We want to intervene before we avoid. This will help break that cycle of procrastination. So to accomplish a task, it really does require that the dopamine produced from completing the task is greater than the dopamine needed to complete the task. So when we think about motivation, it's intrinsic motivation, definitely, but it might start with extrinsic motivation. And that really is important to help with the learning process. And we need that to be greater than the friction. So anxiety and the cost of energy exerted on the task. When we think about learning, children who learn to brush their teeth, they don't brush their teeth because they think gum health is a really important thing, right? We brush our teeth because we're told we need to brush our teeth. And then potentially, when we're in middle school, we brush our teeth because we have to, right? We just know that it's in our routine and it's become a habit. And so it's just something we do, like turning off the lights before bed. But then as we get older, we can start to tie brushing our teeth with our overall health, right? There's so many reasons it's good for us and beneficial to have good dental hygiene. But usually that intrinsic motivation isn't the first thing that happens. And so a lot of times we do need to rely on some of these extrinsic motivators to build motivation before a task becomes more rote. We can also think about, they call it in psychology the zone of proximal development. So we always want the task to have the right balance of challenge versus the feeling of competence. So we want the child to feel competent enough that they can engage in the task, but also we want them to be challenged enough so that they're not bored. And when we find that balance, it makes engaging in the task a lot easier. So knowing just doesn't result in doing something often. Just like Quay was saying about running, I'm sure we can all list 10 reasons running is a good thing and why it's important to do. And it doesn't mean that we all go running very often, right? So just knowing something is important or good to do does not directly result in engaging in that task. So you need to change your behavior first in order to change your thoughts and feelings around the behavior. Right? So when we come back here, what happens is the more we're able to finish our homework, right? So if this is like homework completion over here, the more we're able to do it, the less anxiety we'll have over time, right? So the more we can get started and finished, the more slight this slope is going to be. So because what we're doing is we're showing ourselves that, oh, we actually can complete the homework when we sit down and work through it. So changing that behavior changes the feelings that we experience when we start the homework. And then once we've taken avoidance out of the equation, it doesn't result in these negative beliefs because we've kind of dispelled them on our own, right? We've showed ourselves that, oh, we can actually complete our work when we sit down to do it. So how do we actually do that, right? Is the question. So here are just a couple of tips. So we want to break tasks down first and foremost. So again, when we think about that zone of proximal development, doing something in chunks is a lot easier than being given a task and just saying, okay, it's like very black and white. I either do it or I don't do it. So when we think about studying for a test, instead of sitting down and saying, okay, it's time to study, we can break it down into like sections or vocabulary words or even pages of the book, or create and follow an outline and assign different components of the study materials every day leading up to the test or in 15-minute intervals. But we want to really break the task down so it's very manageable, which ties into number 3, which is to let them experience small wins. So when kids are able to check something off of the list, they start to feel accomplished. And that feeling will really help to motivate them to then engage in the next task. But sometimes it goes even further than that. Sometimes it's not even about actually doing the work itself. Sometimes it's about just getting a child to sit down at the table, right? So we can start breaking it down into, okay, if you can sit at this table for 5 minutes, then you can take a minute to like run around the house, right? So we can reward kids for these very, very like seemingly minor tasks depending on where they're at. And we want to also set the environment up for success. I think this gets overlooked very often, but this is probably the most important thing, really having a time of day where you're going to complete homework. So it doesn't really matter what the time of day is necessarily. Like I know parents often like to give kids a break after school, and that's fine. But you want to have a time where it's like, okay, this is the designated time to do homework. This is the environment where we complete homework. And this should be separate from where a child sleeps, or where a child plays, or where the TV is, or where their cell phone is. It should be a place that's designated for homework, and there should be expectations around that environment. Like as soon as you're done, you can have your phone, or as soon as you're done, then you can watch TV, or as soon as you're done, then we'll eat dinner. Whatever it is. But when you have that designated time and place to complete the homework, it might be a struggle to get into that routine. But once you've gotten into it, it's kind of like walking into the kitchen and feeling hungry. I know it happens to me. As soon as I enter the kitchen, I'm like, oh, I think I'm like feeling a little hungry, but it's just conditioned. Because like the kitchen is where I eat. So when I walk there, I am more likely to start feeling hungry. Just like when you have an environment that's designated for learning, you're more likely to be able to sit down and focus. And it's only over time that this environment gets built and associated with something like homework completion. Yeah, so I went ahead of myself a little bit, but when we act here, just to reiterate, right, we're breaking this cycle and we're changing peripherally the anxiety and negative beliefs around the task, which in this case is homework completion. So when we think about our first two case examples, with the PrEP program anyway, what we do, especially for younger kids, is we have a point system. And when we think about breaking tasks into really manageable reinforcers, we reward children for things like sitting in front of the Zoom call for extended periods of time, and build in breaks, and help create that environment to have the structure. Like, I need my computer, and I need my backpack, and I need my login to my Google Classroom. And I'm going to be in a room where the door is shut, and I am not going to have access to any other electronics other than my laptop. And we get points for all of those things. And the thing about reward systems is they only work, right? Positive reinforcement only works if it changes the behavior, if it increases the behavior that we're trying to target. And so what that means is, if a point system isn't increasing the behavior we want to see, then it's not positive reinforcement, right? We're not actually doing it. So we always need to find something that does motivate the child, whoever it is. And that really does vary for kids. Some kids just want to like talk. They like love talking and having conversations. And so we can build talking and having conversations into the reward system for doing the tasks we want to see more of. For some kids, it's video games. For some kids, it's YouTube videos. For some kids, it's like a specific snack, right? But whatever it is, we want to figure out what they actually want to work for, and then reward them with that through the point system. So they're constantly getting reinforced for like really minor things that will make it more likely that they'll sit to complete the homework assignment. We break the assignments down into really small and manageable tasks for him to complete. And we schedule breaks in there too, because I think knowing when your break is coming up will make it much more likely that you'll be able to persist in completing a task. And then when we think about perfectionistic tendencies and how to address this, we always want to first come up with a game plan to make sure that the avoidance isn't going to result in missing deadlines, because perfectionistic tendencies really do often result in like severe procrastination, because when something isn't perfect, the task is much harder to complete, and not only complete, but also submit. So it doesn't really matter how much time you spend on it, but it does matter if it gets completed by the due date. So with the 17-year-old, we want to make sure we lay out when things are actually due so that no deadlines are missed. But we also want to set expectations around how much time is a reasonable amount of time to spend on something like brainstorming. So we would like set a timer, let's say, for 7 minutes, and you and the 17-year-old would come up with a bunch of ideas, and the best idea that's chosen is the one that at the end of the 7 minutes that they'll use for the essay. And then for the next 20 minutes, right, set a timer again, and the essay has to be written. And you can go back after and edit or change if you need to, but sometimes when the problem is initiating a task, we just have to kind of move from the brainstorming period to the actual task completion assignment. And so we can do this through timers, through assistance, just sitting there and encouraging them to begin that writing process. Okay, so those were the two case examples and the bid to change the behavior before thinking about focusing on the motivation or the stress and anxiety or negative cognitions around the task. And something the PrEP program does is we help with exactly these issues. So I hope that just having this conversation will be helpful in your everyday lives, but oftentimes
Sure.
kids need a little bit more assistance or structured time with somebody one-on-one to really break this down and help individualize plans for kids, because I do think depending on the specific child and what they're procrastinating, that plan can differ. So I'm more than happy to review anything I talked about or answer any questions you have about procrastinating in general, or specific questions you might have about like homework completion or other task completion too, because it really isn't all about homework. Kids procrastinate plenty of different things, and the strategies work the same way, whether it's school related or an extracurricular activity or even a project that they're doing independently that they want or need to complete.
Great, thanks, Amanda. We have quite a few questions, so we're gonna get started on the questions. If you can continue to kind of send in questions. While we kind of waiting for people to still send in their questions, I kind of just want to post a link in our chat. This link is our PrEP program's measure system. What it really means is that this is what we use to measure success, to measure how much progress a child has made over the past month. And something good about this is that first, it's free. And a really important thing about it is that when you go through this and kind of really use this on your child, think about your child, it will give you both an idea of what executive functioning skills are, right? Like we have to know what it is that we need to teach to actually teach it. So when you kind of go through this free executive functioning measure, it can give you an idea of what executive functioning skills are. So kind of be aware or even teach your child those. And another thing is that they will kind of give you a general idea of where your child is with these skills, whether or not they have it. So I just kind of post that link. So you feel free to kind of use it. A lot of the executive functioning skills we take for granted, actually. We kind of just like learn that as we go. And we just like, oh, you need to teach a child how to prepare for exam. And don't you just kind of like learn it as you take exams? But that's true for some people, but not true for everybody. And some children needs to be deliberately taught, this is how you study for exam. Like, how do you know that you've studied enough that you're ready for exam, right? Another example would be, many children, like, students come to our prep program and they wouldn't even know, oh, wait, I'm supposed to write down my teacher, like what my teacher say about the assignment. Like nobody taught me, like, how do you guys know this? Nobody told me that I need to do this, right? So there might be kind of some gaps in the teaching. And then once they know, be like, oh, that's how you guys do it. That's why you guys don't forget about things that nobody taught me. Now that someone taught me this, now I know. So I just sent that link. So just try to use it. Let's address these questions. Amanda, could you stop sharing? So because I want to
Oh, yes.
questions so people could kind of see them.
Absolutely.
The first question, I put all the questions in here. I will continue to put questions. The first question is, high school psychologist here. Hello, our colleague.
Hi. Yeah.
My question is
Nice to have you.
yeah, sometimes in the classroom, teacher and parents tend not to provide student with praise when the student only has, quote, small success, unquote. Is there something I can say to teachers about those small praises are so important?
Yeah, I hear that like really loudly. And honestly, I feel for teachers because they have so much on their plate, especially over the last couple of years. Yeah, it's really tough out there for them. Um, I guess what I would say is like I love using metaphors whenever possible, right? So when you're teaching a kid to tie their shoes, if the child doesn't know how to tie their shoes, you're never going to get to the end, right? So if you only ever say, great job tying your shoes, and a kid doesn't know how to do it, you're never going to praise them. So you have to praise, oh, good job crossing the laces, and good job putting the lace under, good job making the bunny ears, and good job tying the knot, right? So like if you ever want to be able to praise good job tying your shoes, then you have to break down the steps and praise those steps along the way. So our shared goal is to be able to just do it at the end and praise the overall product. But you can't jump there if the kid can't jump there. You really do have to meet them where they're at. I find sometimes when you break it down into a metaphor for a teacher, they're like a little bit more likely to understand, but it does depend on personality and like how overwhelmed they're feeling. But I think like when you focus on communicating that your goal is the same, right? Your goal is for the teacher not to have to always celebrate the small successes, but in order to be able to celebrate the bigger successes, we have to get the kid to the point where they're, yeah, doing the big success or having the big success.
Great, great. The next question is, do these also apply for older kids like high schooler? How much should parents get involved with high schoolers?
Yeah, and I think this is one of the things that coaches, like executive functioning coaches, can be a little bit more helpful with, because I think unfortunately the dynamic with teenagers, between parents and teenagers, is a little bit different than elementary and middle school. So it can be more challenging for parents at that point. But I think, you know, if you are doing it on your own, then really just that homework environment is your best bet. So setting it up, and you can do this collaboratively with your teenager, right? Where do you want to do your homework? How can we set up that environment, right? If they want to do it in their room, how can you help them not do it in their bed, right? Can they do it on the floor? Is there a desk? Is there a separate chair they can do it in? And that could be like their homework chair. And then just making sure you're finding a way to make something they enjoy doing contingent on homework completion. So, you know, maybe we put our phone in the kitchen until homework is done, or like all electronics are off until homework is finished, and just kind of making that the routine and the norm, and relying on that to help with that motivation for teenagers to engage themselves. But if teenagers are willing, honestly, I do think that helping them even just organize and break the task down into smaller, more manageable pieces is a helpful exercise to go through if they're willing.
Great, great. Next question, is it okay to tell my kid to finish homework before they can have dinner or go to bed?
Yeah, I think like having these homework be contingent, or these other things, especially if they're motivating, be contingent on homework completion is a good thing. You obviously want to make sure it's reasonable, right? So if they're like in sports until 7:30 and they're hungry, and like maybe they might need to eat dinner before they complete their homework. But if they have a couple of hours before dinner time, and the rule is they have to complete their homework before they have dinner, I think, yeah, that makes sense to me. as long as it's reasonable.
Great. Another is that so this child is involved in many activities, both in and outside of school. And so, for example, he has robotics club and other classes after school, and these things also have work that he has to complete. So would kind of a coach help manage their time more effectively across all of these different commitments? Like not only, I guess the question is that would the coach help with outside work or just the school assignments?
Yeah. So it's a good question. And like I said before, I think I've been using homework as the main example, but really it's anything that requires any sort of organizing and planning and executive functioning skills to complete. I think the skills transcend the task itself. We just apply them a little bit differently. So our coaches anyway are happy to help apply the skills to any task, not just school related
Yeah, our coaches would
difficulties.
actually have the child kind of write down a full list of all of their engagement or activities and kind of plan out their week, and this is when you do what and so on and so forth. So another question is that what are the possible reasons behind the procrastination on practicing music instrument or instrumental music? This is not mandatory as school assignment, but I don't want to push them too hard.
Yeah, this is a really good question, and I think it is important to really consider because I think this happens with sports a lot too. And so the question for me anyway, right, when we're thinking about like what hill do we want to die on, right, when we're thinking about how to approach not only parenting but like what to have your kid engage in, it like what's the value there, not only for you but also for your child? Like, is it important to you that your child learns to play a musical instrument, and does your child see the value in that overall? If the answer is yes, right, if they're like, yeah, I actually do want to learn to play the piano, I just don't really like practicing, or when I sit down to practice, it's like boring and I don't want to do it. But I really like recitals, and I like being able to play. If that's the answer, then I would say, like, absolutely, we should treat it like any other commitment, right? If you're going to do something, we want you to engage in it in the way that your teacher or coach expects you to, right? If a kid signs up for sports, we're going to have them go to every practice and do like the drills they need to outside of the sport. Now, whether or not they play that sport is up to you as a family. But if you're going to have them do it, I would say, having them practice at the rate that their teacher is recommending that they practice is an important thing to do. But again, if you're not finding that value there, then maybe playing the instrument is just like not a commitment or after school activity that we should be pushing at all, or engaging in.
Great. So this next parent says, I want to get my child an executive functioning coach, but I have a younger child who typically struggle with virtual learning. How can we make sure they join the meeting properly and manage his hyperactive behaviors? I guess they're asking if they kind of sign up for executive functioning coach and then we're all virtual. How do we manage that?
Yeah, I think, when Wei and I developed the company, we had this in mind because virtual learning is challenging. And I think we set up the behavior system to address exactly that. So for kids who really struggle, we can make the lesson shorter, right? Instead of an hour, we can do 45 minutes, and then we'll really just increase the breaks and make sure we include something that they enjoy doing. But I think you know, the way we have our behavior system set up is to manage this difficulty exactly. And you know, I do think there are some kids for whom virtual just absolutely will not work. And if that is the case, like, we'll be honest with you that you should find an in-person coach, because we do want your child to get the services and assistance that they need. But I think we have covered a lot of bases in our behavior system for this difficulty.
Great. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. This is another good question. So as you said, the underlying cause of procrastination is linked to deeper psychological issues like anxiety or self-esteem concerns. Should we consider, you know, counseling in such cases, or an executive functioning coach is sufficient?
Yeah, so I think, you know, kids with clinically significant anxiety should definitely be seen by a mental health professional. I think treating anxiety is absolutely, you know, necessary. We know when anxiety goes untreated, the long-term outcomes are worse, right, than people who get treatment for anxiety at a young age. But we all experience anxiety. It happens on a spectrum. And so if you're concerned that your child is struggling from clinically significant anxiety, then I would definitely say get an evaluation by a psychologist or another mental health professional, just to make sure that you're not missing anything in terms of treatment. I think the executive functioning coaching will help the anxiety related to like homework or task completion. But again, if the anxiety is clinically significant and more generalized, then we do want to make sure that you're getting professional services for that also.
Yeah, so one of the things we do actually is that we provide a short consultation with all of our clients before they kind of on board with us, just to make sure that they're the right fit, right? Like Amanda said, if they have, you know, really other prevailing issues, then we would kind of recommend that maybe this is not a good candidate. So one of the ways to do that is to kind of go to our website. I'm gonna put our website in the chat. Let me share kind of how you do it. And then there's really no obligation for you to you know, sign up or anything afterwards. But I kind of just want to share when you go to our website. And then here you can book a free consultation with us. And then this would be a really good way for you to really talk to us about like what is it that you're seeing with your child. And again, you know, after the 15 minutes, there is really we're not going to give you like a sales pitch or anything. Like there's really no obligation for you to sign up or anything, but this is kind of just to give you more time to talk about if a coach is a good fit for you, or you should seek other type of help. So I put the website in the chat. Let me reshare the question because we have more questions. These are really good questions, guys.
Yeah, they are very good questions.
Hi, Dr. Ferriola. Thank you for the insightful presentation. I have had an executive functioning coach for my child, but he just gave her some schedule template and she didn't really care to use. So I'm hesitant to try again. My question is, when we hire an executive functioning coach, how can I, as a parent, measure or identify improvement or progress in the coaching?
Yeah, so that's also a really good question. I think, you know, I think that really gets to what we were talking about earlier about like how knowing and doing, you know, don't equate. So you do want to find a coach who will not only teach the skill, but help the child implement it in the sense that they're actually doing it while the coach is there. So they're using it and repeating it over and over and over. So it becomes like a rote process instead of just saying, here, try this, and then sending them off on their way to like try that thing. And I think, you slowly scaffold that support off as you continue. But the second part of the question, honestly, I would say the measure is a pretty good way to know whether you're making progress or not, even if you're not using our executive functioning coaching, because that really does cover the components of executive functioning that are important to target. So if you just want to use that measure, the link that Hui put in the chat to I think you can really get a good picture of like before and after if you're seeing progress in any of those areas.
Yeah, so I just kind of posted a link again. Again, if you are using our services, or if you are coaching your child, by yourself, or if you're hiring someone else, right? We should kind of really measure progress to know if we're actually even doing anything. And then this link is free, and you can measure as many times as you want. So even if you don't use any of our services, you could still, like, I would encourage you to do it again, every month or every 2 months, just to track progress. And this is really good because, you can really see. So after you fill out this form, you can also see what are the strengths and weaknesses of your child, right? If your child already knows to pack their backpack, if the day before, or knows to organize their backpack and already knows all these skills, then you don't need to teach them, right? And then, but if you can kind of help you identify their weaknesses and point that you need to teach them, right? So after taking the measure, you would know, oh, maybe they already know this and that, but however, they don't know how to remember to even submit their homework, or they don't know when. So one of the things that our coach do constantly is to help a child message their teacher to seek clarification. Because, one thing that the child says very often when we coach them is like, oh, I actually don't know how to do this assignment. I don't remember what my teacher says. And then we'll be like, hey, like, let's message your teacher right here, right now. Like, how do you message your teacher? And the child's like, nobody taught me how to message my teacher. I don't even know, right? And then we'll kind of really coach them. And they're like, I don't know what to say. Especially, when they're like a high schooler and they're trying to almost like ask for an extension, or like some kind of leniency, or ask for clarification. It's really tricky. Like, there are some nuances that you need to say in the message you send to the teacher, right? So our coach would kind of typically, and then you can do it yourself, right? Like, you can coach them, like, this is how you write a message to your teacher in a very very polite and respectful way. And those are skills that needs to be to be taught for many of the students. So with the measure, you can really identify things that they are not have not learned yet. So you know what to teach. It's almost like a screener. You're screening the skill to see what they already have and what they don't yet have.
Exactly.
I think we're like right on time. Just like
amazing. Great. Time management.
Great.
Yeah, well, it was such a pleasure having everyone. And please, if you have questions later, or would like to talk more, please email us, or sign up for a call on the website. Like Hui said, we're really doing this because we think there's such a need, and these are such important skills for kids to learn at a young age. And so, yeah, really anything we can do to be of assistance, we are more than happy to do that.
Yeah, we hope everybody a very successful school year.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Bye.